Just some real quick background for anybody that might be new here. We have two bulldozers. One's a 1966 and one's a 1968, and we're trying to turn them into one working machine. There's a playlist in the description that covers the entire project, but right now we're working on the engine.
Alright, so I gotta take all these rods off the old pistons and put them on the new pistons. Does direction matter on these?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I wouldn't even bother putting the pistons on yet.
You don't want them on?
Just take them off and then we'll put these in the vise with the new bearings after we clean everything. Check our oil clearances against the crankshaft.
Alright, well.
I would just pull the pistons off.
The marks go the same direction as the valves.
Yeah.
That's the important thing to remember. This one might need some extra persuasion.
Pressed in there?
It's not pressed, it's rusted. This is the cylinder that was filled with water.
A little darker.
It'll probably come out. The wrist pin is rusted to the aluminum. So if you break it free, it'll come out. So, wrist pins are supposed to be nice and smooth and easy to come out. This one's rusted in place because this is, see how the rings are stuck in this too and everything. This is the one that we had to beat out with a sledgehammer and a block of wood. There was a reason the engine wouldn't turn, so I'm gonna try and knock it out with a brass punch. Might have to press it out. Alright, so we're set up in the hydraulic press. I've got one of the other wrist pins up here for a spacer, and then the press is above that. Now, it's moving already, so it didn't take that much to get it moving, but I don't want to press this rusty bit through. I don't want to press it through the rod, so I'm going to try to press it down a little bit. I don't know, I'm probably just gonna have to press it right through. I'm gonna try to clean it up as I go, but I'm only gonna be able to do so good of a job. That's still free on there. That's a good sign. Alright, now I got the better pin in there, but the crappy one is still stuck, so I could press it farther on the press, but I think I should be able to knock it out of here. Well, probably can do it. So that's out. All right, so I just finished taking the rods apart. Tom already put them all together, put the bearings in, torqued them down, you know, put them in the vise, torqued them to spec, and then measured the bearing clearance. So I got them all laid out here so I don't mix them up, because he's got everything measured and everything's reasonable. I think we're kind of big on the bearing size, but we're well within the acceptable wear. So 2 things we have to do on these. There's still a little bit of pitting here, so we're just gonna try to sand to at least knock, if there's any rust in there, just to knock it out, because this area here does contact the crank, so you don't want grinding paste in there. And so I think I'm gonna do this work first and then put the pistons on. I'm not gonna sand them here, obviously, because I don't want that stuff getting on the bearings. So just scrubbing them down with WD-40 and Scotch Brite, and then we're gonna throw them in the ultrasonic cleaner to get all that off them, and then they should be good to go after that.
Make the existing bed so it's a roll-off. So the crank's in. I'm just gonna get ready to build the connecting rods and pistons, put all that stuff together, and then get those installed in the block. So the first to go on is the oil control ring. Then the second compression ring, which I believe I'll have to look this up. It's got a notch on the inside corner. I believe you put that towards the top, such that the ring can rock as it's going down in the cylinder to scrape oil off. Let me look that up. Alright, I actually looked, we got the old pistons here, and these are set up, I'm assuming these were factory everything. I don't think this motor's been in, I don't think anyone's been inside this motor since it's been built. And same rings, you know, sort of ring setup, 3 ring setup. And they have the chamfer, or this counter bore is really what it is, on the second ring facing up. So it's not marked other than that, there's no dot or anything. But the old piston has it so that that internal feature is facing up. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to get a ring expander. And the top compression ring is unmarked, so it'll just go on one way or the other. So with the rings on, and they all spin freely, I have to determine which direction the connecting rods go. I found out which way to orient everything. So the piston has the valve reliefs that should be placed in that manner, right? So that your pin is in the right spot, and then your rod can go either this way or this way, but they should all be marked down in this area. You might barely be able to make out a 4 there. That should be placed such that if you have that inspection cover open down there, you'll be able to read the numbers. So that makes it so that, see that pip that's on the rod there? That'll be facing the front of the engine, which is this side. So the pip goes to the front of the engine, and the valve reliefs are oriented like that. So I'll go ahead and get the piston on there with a new pin. Some assembly lube and everything. There we go. That should be number 4 ready to go. So I got piston 3 here. I'm just going to do the same thing I did on the other one. It'll be a good idea to go back and oil all these rings after the fact. The spring part like that. Get it down on that groove. Like I said, on this second ring, I don't know if it'll be able to zoom in on that. See, there's that inner kind of chamfer. It's not a chamfer, it's a square shoulder. That goes up. It sucks that my ring expander is not big enough. Brand new pins to put in. Everything you gotta be careful, probably comes with some sort of preservative wax you want to get rid of. And then just a light coat of break-in lube. Get that started. This is piston number 3. Front engine's left. And then the front of engine is this pip, so I'll put it facing that direction, but first I'll get some lube on there. There we go. That should be just like that. Good. It's just a good idea to stick rod bolts up in there. One thing to mention is I've already measured each of the bearings against its respective pin on the crank. So we want to keep these bearing sets matched to the connecting rod that they're in. Not that it really matters that much. The crank is all very consistent across all of the crank pins. But it's just good they're measured for that pin, so it's good to keep them with it. Same thing goes with the rings. I gapped, or I just measured the gap. I didn't actually have to grind anything. They all came out good from the factory. But I measured all of them in their respective bores. Of course, we have brand new sleeves and everything, so they're also very consistent across all of them. But I measured each ring in its respective bore, and it measured good, so I'm keeping that set of rings with that piston, with that rod, with that set of bearings, you know, for its position on the crank, so that everything stays where it should be. Because we have so many brand new parts, it really doesn't matter that much, because they've all been measured. They all measured good clearances, and because all the base measurements are good, you know, everything's within spec. You could honestly mix match all of this stuff and nothing would matter. But it's just good practice, so that's what I'm doing. I'm just gonna go ahead and load up the last two pistons, and then we can stick them in the block, I guess. All right, before I get the piston in, first thing I'm gonna do is I already wiped out the bore really good, but I want to go in there with a lint-free cloth and just pick up any additional residue, anything that I can off these cylinder walls, just so they're nice and clean. I have the crank rotated up to top dead center on piston number 1. I'm just going to reach in, same cloth, and clean up the crank pin in case there's any dust or anything on it. It really shouldn't matter, but it's nice to be thorough. So the next thing, I'm going to grab piston number 1, which I have here. And I haven't yet clocked the rings, so first thing to do with the rings is pick a direction for the oil ring, and then 120 degrees off both compression, or more or less 180 and 90 is, I think, is what the book kind of calls out. So those in the right spot, but I want to get a little bit of oil on there, so I just have some non-detergent straight 30. I want to get oil in those rings, so I'll just kind of grab them and work it around. Alright, I already got my bearing shell in there, but there's nothing on it. What I want to do is get an amount of assembly lube on there. And same thing with the crank pin. Just so it's there and ready. I have my valve reliefs in the correct orientation. And the rod is a very tight fit in the bore. I got my ring compressor. Gonna clean some garbage off of it. Get that started over the rings. Make sure those are clocked correctly still. And there we go. So that's number 1 piston is in there. We're not done yet because I need to be able to get the bearing and what do you call those, nuts, rod nuts on there. Get the camera just resting here. You can see I got the cap is right there, where the piston is down on there. I'm waiting for the cap. The cap has a pip on it, just like the rod does, that faces the front of the engine. I'm just going to put a good coating of assembly lube in the cap itself. Hopefully I'm going to be able to get this up there. There we go, it's on there. Ooh. I need to get a nut. I don't have a nut in my hand. Go ahead and get that back up there, hopefully. There we go. And now that started. I can probably get the other nut on there. Have to turn the crank. I can reach up from the bottom and get the bolt pulled down. There we go. I have both nuts, hand tight at least, so I'll be able to move on to the next piston. Same thing. Just clean this up quick. These have already been wiped down a lot with brake clean and paper towels. Same thing. Get some oil on the rings. It's too much. Perfect for the pip. Goes that way. Rings oriented. Assembly lube. Okay. Get the next cap. I'm visually verifying it's all number 2 with number 2, number 1 with number 1. Get this sneak up from under here. Oh, let me grab a nut again. Thing, I'll have to rotate the crank. Ooh. The rod bolt pushed itself up and I can't get it to push back down easily. It doesn't help that it's at such an awkward angle. I have to get something to bang that down in place. Thinking if I can hook around it with a hammer, the top of the hammer, and I'll hook it down. It's just a real pain. I wonder if I get it bottom done better. Come on! You're kidding me. Is there a way? No. If I laid the engine over, I could do it, but there we go. It's finally drawn down into place. Now just 2 more cylinders to go. Holy Christ. Assembly lube. The bearings we wiped down with brake clean and a clean paper towel, so there's no residual oils. You know, you can worry about if you get some of the acids and salt and stuff that come out of your fingerprints can get on there and actually etch a spot that might run dry during startup, you know, initial startup. So it's good to clean those and then get fresh lubricant on there. There we go. Okay. Everything looks good. Bearing cap number 3. See, right there is the pip that goes towards the front of the engine. And that also means that this number 3 there, I don't know if I can get that on camera. That 3 faces this way when that pip faces the front of the engine. Front of the engine right now is that way, it's the left. Hopefully this one doesn't put up as much as a fight as number 2 did. Come on. The back bolt's doing the same thing it did on the other one. Where it's pushing up through. I can't imagine doing this in the frame machine. It's gotta be pretty miserable working in a dirty tractor with even less clearance than I have now. That bolt's doing the same thing. I may just see if I can get the 4th one in, rotate this whole engine. Let's just go ahead with the 4-cylinder. You know, some guys claim that the piston rings will rotate all on their own during the running of the engine. You know, as it runs, those just slowly kind of walk around the piston. And they claim that there's no sense in lining up rings in the first place. I don't know if I quite buy that. I do think that they rotate, maybe, over the course of the lifetime of the engine. But I'm not, you know, I still think it's worth lining up if you can. Yep, all the pistons are more or less in. You just gotta tighten down those rods. Let's see if I can tilt this thing on its side. No way. Okay. Here we go. So you can see that last, anyway, this nut or bolt is pushed up into the rod. There's no way to get at it, so I gotta kind of hook it. Enough to get a nut on there. Then I can just draw it in the rest of the way. Now they're all on snug where they're supposed to be. All 8 nuts are on. The crank still spins freely. Of course with a little bit more resistance. And there we go. That's together. I figure I may as well torque these now while I got it like this. The book calls out 85 foot-pounds for the connecting rods. But I'm going to do that just in steps, just by feel, back and forth. And I got it set to 85 right now, so right there it clicks. Those are on. This one. Okay, everything's torqued. All right, I'm putting in the cotter pins now, and the way they're shaped, there's little like a waist down there. You can see there's like 2 eyelets. Of course, the nuts are castellated like that, and they're all torqued to 85 foot-pounds. But like on this one, there's not quite a set of holes that line up very well. This one might go. But the idea is that you get them torqued down and then lined up to the point. Oh, that one might go. And if you have to turn it a little more, that's okay. Get them torqued, and if they don't line up quite as, you know, oh, words. If they don't line up correctly, you can turn the nut a little more, right, until they do, and then put it in. It doesn't, you're not worried about over torquing the nut. What you want to do is get that waist up into the cutouts in the nut, like I have over here on this one, where, you know, this one's still straight. It's sticking through to that point. And when you got it like that, then you can go ahead and fold them over like I have on these other ones. You just take your tangs and get them folded. Trying to do this on camera. It's difficult with the camera in the way. There we go. That one's folded over. And this one, I'll have to give it a little help to get up there. So there we go. I'll do that on the other two, what do you call them, pistons. But it's the same deal on the mains as well. It doesn't look like any of these line up correctly. There's two sets of holes on the mains. One is higher up and the other one's a little further in on the bolt. Like one's at the very end of the bolt and the other one's a little bit further in. Like this. You gotta give it a little more. We can just start to see the next hole. A little bit more. There we go. That one's lined up. There we go. That was pretty straightforward. I'll go ahead and do that for all the other nuts, and then I should be able to get this thing up in the air, start installing some of the front timing stuff. So I got all those cotter pins in. Now I need to start doing some stuff with the front, get the cam in, balancer shafts and stuff. Before I do either of those, I have to put on the front intermediate plate thing. This here. This goes on top of those two. And then the reason you put this on first is because right now I have the cam gear on the cam itself, and it needs to be able to slide in through there. Same thing with the balancer shafts. I don't think the gears were clear trying to get this thing on after the fact. So this will go on first, but before I put this on, I have to put on the gaskets. And here they are in pieces. Like I think this one goes on like that. This one goes down this side, it looks like. And they kind of puzzle piece together. I'm gonna go around with some RTV and dab some RTV on those just to make sure, or to try to prevent as much leaking as possible. And this one will go on there. But let me get some RTV. Stick a little down here just to help keep it in place. I prefer to be sparing with this stuff because you never want just big gobs of it floating down into your oil, plugging your pickup screen. But I prefer to use very small amounts. The gasket should seal. Granted, everything's flat and clamping well. You shouldn't need a whole 2-bar TV to assemble an engine. Put that on. This can go on. Now, of course, some of these bolts, or a lot of them, go through the cover, the actual timing cover that goes on. But a few of them, like these two up here and that lock, will go on beforehand. I want to throw some oil on these bolts. A little bit of motor oil. Anywhere I can see there used to be a lock, I know that's internal to the cover, so I can put on a couple bolts there. I think that's everything that I can snug down for now. I'm not going to torque anything, I'm just going to tighten it snug. There's a good chance I'll be pulling it off anyway, so I don't want to go crazy. So now I got to think, there's an idler gear that goes in here, cam, and then 2 balance shafts. A lot of this stuff I can't get to once I get the cam in. I believe it'll be in the way. I don't think I'll be able to torque these or these. So maybe I will go ahead and torque everything you see, get some other stuff on, because I don't want to be pulling the cam in and out or the balance shaft in and out. I'm going to look up a spec and torque those. Alright, these are all 3/8 course, so they're all going to 30 foot-pounds. It is nice working up this high, but I wish I had something other than just chains. Most of the sealing that's going on is going to be done with the clamping pressure from the bolts that go on the cover around here and everything. These bolts do sealing, but like over here there's not much going on until we get the actual cover on. So check all these again and bend those tabs because I think we're done here. Alright, I got those torqued. The torque wrench happens to be a little out of whack, so I just put on a few more foot-pounds. For a 3/8 fastener, the book calls out between 27 and 37 foot-pounds, so I just set the wrench to 35, try to land somewhere in the middle. Now we'll fold these locks over. I really don't see these being necessary. No modern engine has locks on every bolt, but alright, so that's on. I'm thinking the next thing to put in is the crank, or the cam rather. But I want to wipe down every journal. Wow, that's tricky. This is when you need your 120-pound double jointed Filipino buddy. go. I want to wipe down the cam too. Keep in mind, everything's been cleaned in the past. What you're doing at this point is just getting any residual dust or anything off. We also had this cam reground because there was some rust forming on a couple of the lobes, and it was a little too pitted to just get out with Scotch-Brite or like, you know, crocus cloth or anything like that. It was just too pitted to do it, you know, too far gone. So we got that reground. First, I want to go ahead and get some on all the journals. But I also got to double back and make sure I get a helping amount on each of the lobes, because those are really what break in. Those are the hardest wearing surfaces on any break-in, is the lobes of the camshaft. Of course, you want your rings to seat, you want, you know, your bearings to run in properly. But the thing that causes the most catastrophic failures is low oil pressure causing failure of one of your tappets. And if you look at any assembly lube, it's got a huge amount of ZDDP in it, zinc, and that helps a lot with the break-in, which is why you're smearing it all over every engine component as you put it in. Of course, when we put the lifters in, we can shoot some assembly lube back onto the lobes again from the top of the engine, and then we can also put some on the lifter faces just to be sure that everything's, you know, that there's a film of oil on everything. Now we can go ahead. Something you want to avoid. So that's in, but now there's a C stamped on the cam there, and there's a C stamped on the crank there. So I want to rotate the crank until the C lines up. Here's a C there, here's a C there. And rotate that. Yep. I want to avoid that. I'm going to rotate the crank into position. Probably from back here. Put a couple bolts in it and spin it that way. So now the cam is lined up correctly with the crank. And what I'm going to have to do is sneak the keeper for the cam in behind there. So as that keeper is in place, then there's the, what do you call this, fold over lock and 2 bolts. There's that first fold over lock hole is lined up. Go ahead and get that nut started, or the bolt started. I'm going to have to rotate the cam a little bit to get that other one. First I'm going to snug this bolt up so it doesn't interfere. Let's see what I want it to rotate. There we go. The second bolt started. So both of those in, there's still a little bit of play, like there should be. And then I can go ahead and torque those down. Okay. And I can still feel some lash in the cam. Rotates both ways freely, so we're good. The C's line up. It should be all set. Similar thing with the balance shafts. Go ahead and get things cleaned up, get those stuck in there. So now I can get the balance shaft in there. I already got lube in all of the bearings in the block. I'm just going to get some on the shaft itself. Mount the journals. These are lettered to be timed, and of course there's no gear on here that would that it would mate with yet, because that goes on the oil pump. There's an idler on the oil pump and the actual driven sprocket for the oil pump. Both mesh with the countershafts, and so they're marked. This one's marked with an H. The one that goes on the left is marked with a D, and those line up once you get the oil pump on. But right now they go in very similar to the cam, where you just slide them in, and then there's a couple keepers that are used to retain them axially. The shaft's in like that. So I'm going to get some lube on these surfaces as well. And that one's on. Get the other shaft in. We're pretty much getting close to a full rotating assembly. There's an idler here that'll drive the injection pump. The hydraulic pump, I believe, is what hangs off of here. Oil pump goes down under here. And that's the whole geared drivetrain, accessory drive, whatever you want to call it. I think we're going to try to prime this with engine oil as well before we start it. So a lot of this lube is actually going to get rinsed away when that happens, but here we go. Looks like I'm missing a bolt. I'll have to find another one. Well, that's that. I'll get some bolts torqued down and everything, but I think I'm going to call it for tonight.